So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we have Aimee here. She is from Bits of My Own, which is her own YouTube channel. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself again?
Yes, sure, sure. I've been on this channel a few times. Yeah. So I'm Aimee. I'm also an MBTI content creator. So I just create MBTI content on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot. And I also offer typing services of my own.
Cool. So before I begin, as usual, feel free to check out the personality themed merch that has been updated. And I've also been including the other personality types into the website. So feel free to check it out in the description box below. And today we are addressing a very common problem or struggle among the MBTI community. Basically, this video was requested a few months back, and I had like issues with it because I couldn't like edit with my iMovie. So now I decided to do like a collab, and Aimee actually had a first-hand experience. So if you have watched our video I think 1 or 2 years back, she actually was typed as INTJ, but now she has found that she's actually ESFP. So there's quite a big difference in the personality type, and this is not a rare incident. Like a lot of people
Hmm.
have been mistyped, and my friends as well. So this is like a video that hopefully can help people out who are either confused or they feel like there's something off about the type that they have been like have been reflected on the test or otherwise. Yeah. So I would just start with the question of what do you think are some tips that you have for people who are maybe starting out, trying to find their type as someone who is new to this whole thing?
Yeah, I would say that first and foremost, I think if you have taken an online test, you most likely are mistyped, to be quite honest, because online tests are just not reliable, period. They're just not. You'll get a different answer for every single type of test you take.
Yeah.
And also kind of being open to the idea that you are most likely mistyped. And it's not even that big of a deal, to be honest. I think it's like, I would say that when you first take the test, don't get too attached to that type because it is
Mhm.
most likely not your type. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my
Yeah.
experience, so interestingly, I actually got the most accurate answer when I was like I think 17, and when I didn't know anything about the test.
Mm.
And I think it was like done by school or something. There's like a lot of questions. So maybe that was like a better test that they chose. So one thing I look for is I know all online tests are sort of not very accurate, but I try to look for like tests with more questions and more like specific questions. I feel like it's slightly better than those tests with like very few questions and they quickly conclude that that's like your personality type. Also, another thing is I feel like people, when they do the test, in order to try to be more accurate, they should try not to know too much about the reputation of each type beforehand if they have not gone into it, because I feel like that would also affect their results. Because like some people try to test as a certain type subconsciously because they
Yeah.
already know the reputation, like they want, for example, they want to be um a certain type, or they sort of aspire to be a certain type. That I feel like that can really affect the answering, because you're supposed to be as honest as you can, and as close to who you are when you're answering the questions. And sometimes people can go into the trap of answering based on what they want themselves to be rather than what they actually are. And that's what
Yeah.
happened to like some of my friends who totally
Yeah.
completely changed type, like based on either the
Yeah.
mood of the day or their aspirational type. Yeah, so that's
Right.
like a common thing.
Yeah. I think that I just say mm, it's more common that you're going to mistype if you take an online test. Then I think even when you're taking the official MBTI test, if it's the case that we're not a reliable source of self-awareness, if that's even the case, then I guess that would exclude any online test from being accurate then, because no matter which online test you take, if there's that problem that you are going to reflect on yourself poorly, then I don't think it makes a difference what test we take. But yeah, for the most part, like especially if you've taken like 16 personalities or something, you're most definitely mistyped. Like yeah,
Yeah, especially
yeah,
personality questions themselves have some issues. So it's
yeah,
very, especially like when it comes to like perceiving and judging, like they try to ask people if they are organized, and that's a very subjective question. Like, because I may think I am not so organized on some days, and I may be typed as a perceiver, which is not
right.
accurate because
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that you have to be like super organized. That's more of an STJ thing. um
Yeah,
yeah, so it's really prone. Like I have been typed INFP on that test before. So I'm
right.
like, that's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
my personality type. And but like the one that I did in school, I actually got INFJ the first time. I don't know which test they used, but yeah, I think self-awareness is very important. I feel like when people check up, I feel like they should check their results against the type descriptions. And even though type descriptions are not like 100% accurate as well, but I think that it helps because I had like SFP friends who typed themselves as ISTJ, and that's like completely not their personality in real life. And I showed them the type description. At first, they were like, "Oh, well, I'm ISTJ." I'm like, "Most likely you're mistyped because none of your
yeah,
real life tendency speaks ISTJ." And I started showing them the type descriptions of ISTJ. I had
yeah,
like an
yeah,
ISFP friend type as ISTJ, and I showed her the type descriptions to convince her that she wasn't an ISTJ. And yeah,
yeah.
so she agreed with the type description results better than her own like test results, because I think looking at a description, it's like one of the simpler ways to roughly gauge if you are mistyped, if you are like really um, like a huge difference from the type that you were. And obviously, the best way is to look at cognitive functions, which requires a bit more time and attention. Yeah.
Right. And even that's not necessarily something that's so obvious either, because even the official MBTI test does not talk about cognitive functions. In fact, when we're going into MBTI certification, the MBT, you don't learn about cognitive functions during the certification. It's literally this thing there. It's like,
Wow.
oh, no, yeah. It's they literally say, okay, well, you might get some clients that ask you about cognitive functions, but you can. This is just difficult, so we can just skip over this. It's just kind of this thing. It's not really something that's really
That's really
elaborated on.
sad. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
and it's yeah,
is the basis of all this all. And the reason why people are so unconvinced by MBTI is because they don't know about the cognitive functions. But once you
yeah,
look at it, it's like everything is clear, but
right,
it just
yeah,
requires a bit more of a, read up. I feel like
yeah,
it's not that bad. Like, it's just 8 functions and can read up
yeah,
on the I mean, some of the descriptions might also be a bit inaccurate, but at least it gets a better idea, a much clearer idea into personality types. Like, I saw your video the other day about SE
hmm,
explanation of it, and I thought it was so clear. Like, people reading, like, imagine if they're stuck. Like, imagine if someone is unclear about their type, like maybe they are like ENTJ or ESTP, and then they
yeah,
know about
yeah,
functions, and immediately it's so clear because ESTP lead SE and ENTJ lead with TE, which is very different.
yeah,
TE
yeah.
is very practical, pragmatic, focused on productivity. SE is like in the moment, a lot more chill, whatever. So it's like really obvious when you look at the functions of what your dominant energy is as well. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, but I guess it goes back into I think any personality test focuses on marketing as well. And I think
Yeah,
for
that's true.
MBTI, especially if you go into all those cognitive function things, it's no longer going to be marketable. So they kind of
I
just skip
agree.
over it. And also, I think corporations that hire MBTI to facilitate these MBTI instruments, right? It's like they're they don't really care about personal growth and stuff. They're just kind
Yeah.
of doing it as like a HR thing. So it's
Hmm.
like, so of course, and unfortunately, like there's gonna be people in the group of people like taking the test are gonna be like, oh, but I'm more interested in it. And then by then it's kind of too late because then they're gonna look at the type descriptions, relate to it, and then you can't really go back from there because now you're biased or attached to a certain type description. Yeah. So
Yeah.
even when you're looking at cognitive functions, you're already going into it biased with the type that you want to be. And that's where the rabbit hole begins. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the personal attachment to type is a really like probably the number one barrier, or maybe one of the number one barriers. um
Yeah. Yeah.
like this is where I have to touch on. Obviously, the INFJ type is like, I feel like it's one of the most commonly mistyped, and a lot of times I may even upset a lot of people by talking about this. I feel like even with the type descriptions, the INFJ type especially, people are a little too attached to sort of this label of empathy and kindness. Like everyone wants to be seen that way, right? Like nobody wants to be seen as a terrible person or like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
selfish
Exactly.
person. Yeah. So I feel like when people look at this type descriptions and this like stereotypes, and people have to be very careful not to look at things that are too broad, because when you look at terms like empathy and kindness, it's sort of like everyone can relate to it to some degree.
Of
I
course.
mean,
Yeah. Of
especially
course.
right, especially as a feeling type, you're like, obviously I am, you know, going to be in tune with the feelings of other people, because feeling types generally are, slightly better at it than thinking types. And so yeah, you will relate to some of the type descriptions, but it doesn't mean that you are automatically an INFJ or INFP or whatever, because you feel compassion for people. Like that's just a human trait, I assume.
Yeah. It's like,
I mean, like
yeah.
maybe ENTJs will disagree. They're like, I don't.
Well,
I'm
I
not
mean, I think even ENTJs will be like, no, at the work, I am so selfless. I'm always giving myself to other people. I'm most
true.
likely an ENFJ, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's very
So like
common.
feeling like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think NT, they pride themselves on a different thing, but I think people have to be careful about the overarching like labels, because if you look at like descriptions of INFJs being empathetic and INFPs being empathetic and ENFJs also being empathetic, it's really easy to just mistype yourself, with all of them. And you can
Yeah.
even be an ISFJ or ESFJ and also be empathetic. Like it's just a
Yeah, of
feeling
course.
trait. Yeah, and also
Yeah.
like once you develop your feeling function, even as a INTJ or ENTJ, you can also become like more in touch with the feelings of other people. So it's just too
Yeah.
general, I feel, for people to
Of
just like
course.
on that. Yeah. Well, but
Yeah.
that's what happens. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times people just attach to these labels. That's when you have to be very honest with yourself and look at like, do you relate to the other functions in the personality type? Because INFJs use NI and not many people use
Right.
I, right? And also TI, like, do you actually relate to the TI description, not just one like empathy traits? I feel that it's
Yeah.
like really misleading. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is why I take the NI approach when it comes to typing
Mhm.
people. And I
Yeah.
think that other people should see it this way, which is to say that I think concision is very important when it comes to defining what exactly the cognitive functions are. So when you use words like empathy for FE,
Mhm.
let's just say, right? That means that TE should be the opposite of that. Because if you can't have FE and TE together, then that means that the definitions should be opposite. Now, obviously, FE is not opposite of TE organization. You can be organized and empathetic at the exact same time, right?
Yeah, ENFJs are quite the
So
opposite.
so you can see the problematic, yeah, you can see the problem when it comes to MBTI and reading type descriptions, because you
Yes.
realize that they're not actually opposites of one another, and this is how mistypes can happen: is us not defining the terms correctly or understanding it. Actually, not us, but I would say the people writing the type descriptions are not doing that work.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of like confusion when people develop their later functions. That's when I see a lot of people say, oh, suddenly overnight I changed from, let's say, INTP to INFJ, which doesn't really happen in real life. Um, so I feel like one way to sort of resolve that is to really look at how you are from a young age. I find that to be helpful for me, like because obviously as we grow older, we will start developing our later functions. Like I developed my TI, I think around maybe 15 or something. It's just a rough
Yeah.
estimate. Like I always use it, but it's like, developing more rapidly as I
Yeah.
grow
Yeah.
older. And then SE is more like in college. The development went a lot like more um, like mature compared to the previous times when it's just there and not fully used. But people can get confused because they're like, suddenly I'm from a intuitive or from a thinking type to a feeling type when literally it's just they're using more of their functions at the tertiary level or the inferior level.
Right.
So
Right.
I think for me it's what is easy to see is like looking back at childhood and looking back at us at a younger age and what really comes more naturally to us. So I'm sure like maybe SE is like something that you always had, and maybe
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
things are something that you're more familiar with as like you get older. So what is your experience
Right.
with that?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I think childhood can help, but the only problem is like if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't value like SI at all, they usually don't remember anything from their past like that in that kind
Right.
of a way.
Maybe
And
a
that's
little
like, yeah.
school or like I don't know, maybe like when they are in school in some years, if they can remember
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it's like that's one thing I've noticed. Another thing
Right.
is depending on your type, sometimes I've noticed like some types are more prone to asking people for too much feedback as it relates to their type. So I
Yeah.
noticed like ESFJs in particular like to do
Yes, that's
this.
it.
And it's to the point where it's like at the end of the day, you can't be asking everybody for their type because depending on that person and their relationship with you, their perception of you is also very different. So that also leads to
True. Yeah.
confusion. So I think
Mhm.
depending on the type, you need to take different approaches for how you're going to figure out your type. And I will say that the way you find out your type says a lot about you as a person.
Definitely.
Yeah. So um, as it relates to like preventing mistypes or figuring out how to find your true type, for me, what helped was just understanding the theory.
Hmm.
That for me helped was just like straight up kind of taking the NI approach and being like, wait, let's remove all this fluff and get down to the core, the mechanism of the functions. Getting to understand like psychological opposites, right? Things like this helped me to understand that I can't have, for example, I can't have SI and NI at the same time. So you
Yeah.
are either a person that tends to reflect on the past or you're somebody who's thinking about the future. Which is it? Because you can't do both at the same time. If you're, and then throughout your life, if your personality is the kind of person that tends to look to the future so much, then you're definitely not verifying or definitely not reflecting, right? So when I saw it this way, I was like, oh, okay, it made it so much easier to eliminate what I'm not. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think people don't get that. Yeah.
And I feel like people also can be clear when they look at the conflicting types. I feel like that's one
Yep.
of the
Mm-hmm.
easiest ways because it's more like obvious. Like, for example, INFJs and ESTPs, we are opposites, but we are
The
not
dual.
like
Yep.
conflicting, right? So it's like
Yep.
we have the same functions, but in opposite order. So in real life, we tend to get along, even though we don't look similar, and maybe at first we are not like in the same friend group, whatever. But if you actually interact on them one on one, we tend to get
Yeah.
along. But like the opposite types that have no functions in common, like ESTJs and INFJs, just tend to conflict more often. And people, if they look at that in their real life experience, I feel like it's easier because you
That's
cannot
true.
be an INFP and get along mostly with ESTPs. I think it's rare.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't think I get along with most ESTJs. Maybe occasionally I do, but it's not like something that I feel like a high degree of comfort. So INFP will
Nice,
be the
nice.
opposite. With INFPs, they don't get along with ESTPs, but they get along with ESTJs. At least
Yeah.
the comfort level part differs tremendously. I
Yeah.
don't know if you met any INTPs in real life. That would be your,
Or
potential.
INTJs. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, INTJs, you do get along with.
Yeah. That's my opposite. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So for example, like when I watch like uh he's Chris Astropsych, like the INTJ on YouTube. Like I can kind of see similarities in the way we think and in the way that we make our videos. I mean, maybe mine is a little bit more like edited and stuff, but for the most part, the things that we're saying is exactly the same. And what's interesting is like even little things like body language and stuff would be rather
Yeah,
similar.
so
Yeah, like
true.
it's yeah. When you put two of the opposite types together, you can if you're having trouble with your type, just think of it this way: could you possibly mistype as the opposite person? Because that's when you know, like for example, even an INFP, people I don't know why, but people always make INFPs to be this fluffy bunny personality type, which is so untrue. Like
Yeah,
they're
they have
not. Yeah.
TP.
Yeah,
If you
it's like they're
see
not.
them use extroverted thinking, they're not
Yeah.
fluffy.
I'm like, in what world are these, because there's the stereotype of INFPs being this like really airy, floaty, like fairy bunny type. And I'm like, no, if you meet an INFP, they can, if they really get down to it, they can actually look like an ESTJ. That's
Yeah,
how pragmatic they can be. Same with
yeah,
the INFJ, they can look like an ESTP sometimes.
yeah.
So if you don't find that relatable, you're probably not that type. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you look
Yeah.
at like people of the same with the same functions and you
Yeah.
find
The
each
quadra.
other.
Yep.
So for
Yeah.
example, me with ENFJ, I can sometimes look like an
Yeah.
ENFJ pretty
Yeah.
easily. With ISTP, I mean, obviously I'm not like super sporty and stuff, but like sometimes, the way that we reason, when
Yeah.
I use PI a lot, I can sort of seem like a STP person who's reasoning.
Yep.
And even appearance, like I don't know if you see, like I sometimes confuse. I have an INTJ friend. I have a lot of ISFP friends, and later on, especially when they develop, their each of their functions, and they start to, all dress up and and all
Yeah.
more logical for the ISFPs and more like emotionally attuned for the INTJ. I literally get confused by them sometimes. I'm like, this just reminds me of my other friend the other day. Like
Yeah,
even
I
the way
know.
they facial expressions, right? Because FI is like a bit more stoic.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm like, wow, this is just, and the fashion sense looks similar too. So it's like interesting, like
Yeah,
SFP
yeah.
and J sometimes have a similar style. Like,
They both have this particular like deadpan humor. I don't know if you
yes,
their
I
face is
love,
very like deadpan. Yeah, this is
so funny.
very
I hear
common.
same stuff, yeah, from them.
Yeah.
Fun.
Uh, yeah. I like actually talked to this like girl recently. She was I typed her an ISFP, but I think she came in thinking she was an ISTP. And you explained it perfectly because the way I explained it to her was that if you're having trouble deciphering the two, are you more of an ENTJ or could you see yourself being an ENFJ? Because that says a lot. Like the ICP, even though on the appearance they might seem like a very like strict logical type, they have that inferior FE. So sometimes they can look like an
Yeah.
ENFJ. They're very warm
Mhm.
sometimes. And the
Yeah.
ISFP, they might lead with FI, but throughout time, especially if they're at work or something, they look like an ENTJ. So
Mhm.
if you don't relate to like that ENFJ FE thing at all, you're probably not a ISTP, because that's their aspiring function.
Yes.
And yeah, we kind of agreed, like, oh yeah, that's right. Like if I were in a room with an INTJ, an ENTJ, and an ESFP, I would probably get along more with them than like the ENFJ people. Yeah.
Yeah, but you also get along with ENFJs because you share the NISE, but it just doesn't feel like it's so you.
Yeah,
Like,
I know it's just not vibing as much. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but if you can still get along, yeah. So I,
Yeah.
I think that's such a good way because also when you touch on aspirational function, like you think about
Mhm.
what you aspire to be. And I feel like it's more of an unconscious thing sometimes for people. Like with ISTPs, for example, you can tell that they really want to be this sociable person. They really want
Yep.
to bring like comfort and this like emotional. uh, harmony to people, and
Passion.
I can
Yeah.
see that their behavior in groups. Like, I mean, obviously they don't do it like in such a maybe
Kind of a way.
don't do it to so many people in such a like influential way, the way that
Yeah.
ENFJs do. But individually, they can really take care of like your emotional needs. Like I had an ISTP guy like just hand out worksheets to people who like did
Mm.
not bring something. I don't know. It's just like helping people out at school. They like doing that. It's not because they're trying to. Okay, maybe also because they're trying to be more popular, but like but it's the
Yeah.
FP thing, like you just want to, help people and like
Yep.
look out for people, right? It's an FP
Yeah.
trait. So with ISFPs, not really, because I mean, sure, they can look out for people in an FI way, but it's not really like they don't aspire to be this like
No. No.
sociable, like friendly person to everybody. That's not what they aspire to be. Like they aspire to be more efficient.
Yep.
They aspire to be more productive and more powerful. Like I've had ISFP friends tell me they want to like it's a joke. They know they are not gonna do it, but they're like, let's rise up the corporate ladders together and like take over the
Mm-hmm.
CEO. Obviously,
Yeah.
they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a joke, but it's aspirational. That's like the ENTJ fantasy. I mean, not a fantasy because some of them actually became the CEO, but
Yeah.
with ISFPs, they are not going to do that because they don't lead with TE and they're kind of tired when there's too much of it. But they
Yeah.
can say things like that because that's what they see as interesting and
Yeah.
what they actually want more of.
Right.
So with
Right.
me as an INFJ, I also make such jokes, but not with TE. Like I always talk about how, I'm going to like know a lot of people and I'm going to be like a really making a huge impact and all this like SE stuff. Um, and it's also interesting how I don't know if that's like something that guys do, but for me, when I think of myself as a guy, like it's a bit of a weird thought, but I kind of imagine an ESTP like
Yeah.
myself being a
Uh-huh.
guy because, and my ISFP friends kind of imagine themselves as ENTJ. Like even
Interesting.
without knowing
Yeah.
anything about MBTI, I'm like, so they're like, oh, if I'm a guy, I'm going to be so cold and successful and all that, like, you know.
That's
And
true.
I
That's
say,
true.
yeah, I don't know if you ever thought about that for yourself.
Definitely, definitely. Not just the INTJ, but even the INFJ. I've noticed that there are a lot of inspirational motivation gurus and stuff that have a lot of NI insights, and I typically like listening to those just because it's just so filled with NI. And one day I hope that I can be as insightful as them. Uh,
Hmm.
because the problem with me is usually the opposite in the sense that I have so much target blindness is what I kind of like to think of it as. Is I'm so focused on conquering that sometimes I lose sight of like which direction is this really taking me into. And that's when these podcasts really help me, because it's like they're telling me I'm going in the wrong direction, or maybe they're telling me I'm going in the right direction. And it's like, okay, good, okay, so I can keep going. Otherwise I'd be like totally lost. So I think
Right.
one day I aspire to be that NI dominant type who just like knows, I just know this is right for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, sometimes I also don't know because I feel like everyone is like figuring things out along the way, but it definitely helps like with the inferior function. Like I'm the opposite. I actually look for ESFP music
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's
on
like you got to
myself.
like get out of, yeah.
Like I need to hype myself up. Like you see in some of these videos, people think I'm ISFP. No, it's just I'm just hyping myself up because it's like a requirement for me. But sometimes I feel
Yeah,
like NI is a little too passive and like I need like action. I need to like be inspired to like action and like imagine myself
yeah,
successful. And I like look for ESFP music because that's where a lot of ESFPs are in the music scene. So I
yeah.
look
True.
for those types of music, and they are very like self-affirming. And they are like, oh, I can succeed no matter what, that type of vibe. But it's not like in a TE way where it's about like being in a corporate
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
It's more like you can succeed in things that you want to do, and you can like live the life that you want. That's like my ultimate goal is to live the life that I want to live and to live it the way that I want to live. So it's like a freedom thing for me. So that's where I need the SE inspiration that I
I was
can do
gonna
it as
say, yeah,
well. Uh,
that's a very
that's like
it's a very
looking at
beta
it
quadra thing.
sorry?
That's a very what you just said. That's a very beta quadra thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very like I noticed like that like I don't know if it's like the combination of like FESC or something. They're always talking about their passions and like it's like they're always
Yeah,
talking about
yeah,
their passion projects. Yeah, it's just something I've noticed.
yeah. And also like I mean I feel like ESFPs, okay, you are one of them. Yeah, also have like the
Mhm.
life that I want because a lot of
Oh,
ESFPs go for their passions as well. Like I know some like ESFP actors and actresses, and I'm like, oh, that's another person I can like use for inspiration.
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
already got there, so look at what
Mm-mm.
they do and stuff because it's
Oh,
like
nice.
an oriented approach.
I I wonder if I think the difference between like an ESFP and ESTP is that like the ESFPs being part having TE, they're a little bit more like money hungry versus the
Maybe.
ESTP. Like ESTPs, like I mean, ultimately they don't really care much about resources and stuff. I think they're really just about like they just want to make sure that the rules that are set in place actually make sense and that it's fair for everybody. So there's that like TIFE dynamic going on. So I think that's why the INFJ needs the ESTP dual. But I think like ESFPs actually are more like INTJs in the sense that like eventually it becomes about money and resources. Like
Actually,
eventually
I
it's
also
like
care about that. So, but it's
yeah,
not like immediate. Like I feel like it's not my immediate concern, but it's like a long-term concern for me. Maybe
yeah,
it's
no, yeah.
I feel like it's an SE thing because I like the material comforts too.
Really? Maybe it's
Yeah,
like
because I feel like
yeah.
ESTP, it depends on the person. Like maybe it
Mm,
depends on how you use SE. Like some people use SE in a more like maybe in a more like going hiking. I mean I also go hiking, but like other people use it more in a material comforts way, so it depends on the
right.
person. And I know there are some ESTPs who are like really rich and like just showing off as well, like the
Yeah.
stereotype of the frat boy stereotype.
Yeah, that's like the stereotypical
Yeah,
ESTP
like
character.
yeah, so but they also want to enjoy life, so that's like me basically. Like I want to eventually, yes, I want to be like having the material comfort, so that can only happen with certain amount of wealth. But I
Mm,
also want to enjoy life. Like that's my ultimate goal. Like I want to enjoy life, not because I just want like the money stacking up and me working like to my death. That's not my
yeah,
goal.
yeah.
I feel like there's no
Yeah.
fun if I have like a lot of cars and I'm like dying inside.
Yeah,
Not
sure.
trying to not trying to accidentally shit on TJs, but like
Yeah. Well, I actually think that the ENTJs are more prone to doing that because ENTJs are so like because they don't even have SI either. So it's
yeah,
like
it's
if
sad for
they can
them.
be so uncomfortable to be around because it's just like they just don't care about comfort, at all.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those TE types are like really aggressive. I think in our respective quadras, like yeah,
Yeah.
they're just a little too much. Yeah.
Yeah, even for you, right? ENTJs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I aspire to one day be like that, but it's like, after, I think I'm more conscious of morals as opposed to productivity. While I value productivity, of course, hands down, it's
Yeah.
like to a certain extent, I do prioritize the feelings and the values of other people a lot
And
more than that.
I
Yeah,
think for
yeah, exactly.
yeah. So you're more I feel like ESFPs aspire to be the INTJ person because INTJ is like a bit more balanced in the
Yeah,
TE
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah. So you're more like NI aspirational. Whereas an ISFP will be more like aspirational for the TE stuff. They can sound
yeah,
down old. Like ISFPs, if you're good friends with them, you know what they're thinking. They're like,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
care. I'm just gonna do what I want. Like, don't care if the
Yeah.
other with her.
Yeah. I think FI dominant types are very if you're part of their circle, they're very protective of you. They got you hands down.
Yes,
But it's
yes.
like for other people, it's not too much. It's like
Yeah, I
if
don't
you're not
care.
their friend or family, they don't really care. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just die.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's
unfortunately.
really, but it feels good to be part of their circle too, because you feel special.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's like I say that like with the SFJs, their warmth is sort of like for everyone. Um,
Right.
with like the NTJs and the SFPs, they're like huddled
Yeah,
somewhere.
you kind of need to be in their like FI circle kind of a thing, which is interesting because I feel like FE does that too. FE has their own way of like being VIP, but it's
Yes,
like they have a different way of doing it. It's like based off of power or something, or like strength. It's not or based off of following the same ideology. They tend to like band together because they follow the same ideal, and then they like band together to bring this ideal to life, kind of a thing.
right.
And if you don't
Maybe,
believe in their, yeah,
yeah. I think
it's
I'm
like,
more NI valuing. So my VIP is more like, because NI is like limited energy.
mhm,
So
mhm.
obviously the VIP treatment can only be for my close friends, because I don't even have
uh,
much energy to go to everyone. Whereas I feel like ENFJs probably have like more of the ideology thing.
yeah,
'Cause, yeah, FE dominance. Yeah.
yeah.
I think
But
what like
yeah, no, I just think like when I said ideologies, it's like a way to get kicked out of their circle is if you don't follow the same ideologies as them, or like if you are, I guess, a little bit more selfish in that regard, and you're kind of like just focused on your own interests. That's when they get kind of like, but what about the team, or like what about like I thought we believed in the same thing, and that's you're like out of the circle.
interesting. I don't know,
Yeah.
like maybe I don't know. My friend circle is full of SFP, so I don't know where I came from with that.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I
Interesting.
don't know.
Yeah.
Something happened along the way, but
Yeah.
yeah, I actually get annoyed when people are too ideological. I feel like sometimes FI types can do that too with the INFPs, because they have like a certain moral ethics that are like
Hmm.
FI, that they relate to FI, and then they relate with other people of the same FI standards. So I think it depends on the person as well, like where their personal ethics come in.
I think yeah, FI is the only thing with FI that's different from TI is that FI has no framework. That's what it is. So it's like at least with TI, there's a even if you had like an ideal, you guys are connected with a consistent ideal. Like it makes logical sense to follow this ideal kind of thing. But with FI, it's not like that. It's like if I like you and you produce results for me, if we can be effective together, you're in the circle. If you don't have anything to bring, then you're out, kind of a thing. It's a different kind of exclusivity, I think. So with FI, you can't really like, it's not like, oh, but I believe in the same things as you let me in. It's kind of like, it's up to like the TE thing, which like, well, what are you going to do for us? Or like, what can you produce for us? What good are you going to do to this group? And if you don't really have much, it's kind of like, okay, thanks. Like, bye.
Yeah,
Yeah. If you can't do
and
the
it's
TE
more
thing,
obvious.
it's like
Yeah, and TE makes it more obvious. Like
yeah.
FITE is like more obvious. Like if they don't like you, or if they don't see you as part of their
Yeah.
circle, it's
Hmm.
pretty, like, yeah, you know you're not there. Whereas
Yeah.
FE users can sort of be a little friendlier, but the time difference, I think, is they're just not going to dedicate as much time to you. Yeah,
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm interested. I forgot to mention this, but I'm interested in your personal journey, because you obviously typed in as an INTJ at some point, but you found out that you were ESFP. So how did that journey happen for you?
I mean, honestly, I think that the only reason why it ended up like this was because I had a YouTube channel. That's the only reason why. Because when I think about it, if I didn't have a YouTube channel, I would still be an INTJ and I probably wouldn't care, honestly. But speaking of mistypes, I think this is the only reason mistypes are important to correct is if you are giving advice to people regarding their type. That's the only time I would say correcting mistypes would be important. So, as it relates to my own journey, the only reason why I even found out or cared that I was mistyped was because I was giving advice to people regarding my type. If that were not the case, I would not be here. I really wouldn't care much. So I think yeah, like I started off as an INTJ. I put up a video. To be quite honest, I knew that the INTJ video would do pretty well because I did research on it, and I knew the typology is a, you know, there is a community, a niche there. So I put up a video, and you know, I only took a 16 personalities test, and people were upset. Uh, and so I did a typing session, and amongst other things, and I found out I was an ESFP, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, and that was it. I didn't know that that many people would be affected by that honesty. But like I said, the only reason why I took that much action to correct myself is because I was putting myself in a position where I was giving other people advice.
Right. So you also felt like your type descriptions of ESFP suit you more after you found out?
Not the type descriptions, but the cognitive functions and the theory behind it made more sense to me. Yeah.
Right.
But, you know, to be fair, INTJ made just as much sense. Like, I mean, hands down, if I were talking about strictly MBTI type and MBTI understanding, I still hands down think I'm an INTJ. If we were going with the MBTI description, I completely agree with everything. But of course, like I said, if you understand the cognitive functions, the theory behind it, then I'm most likely not an INTJ. But yeah, it's really interesting, like
Yeah.
how much that progression in knowledge, yeah, how much
Yeah.
it grew, I
Mhm.
guess.
And also, it's like it's confusing because when people develop the TE as an FP type, you are gonna
Hmm.
feel like you are a T type. Like I feel like
Yeah, of
I thought
course.
I was an NT type for a long time, because I'm
Hmm.
very developed in my TI. Like I have like parents who are thinkers, so that like
Mm-hmm.
it helped me with my development with the logic or logical function or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like people can feel like they are a T type when when they develop the thinking functions, and it's like on the same level with like people with the thinking functions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it
Agreed.
can feel that way, but it's like it can seem that way as well. But it's like when once you look at the functions and the order, and it makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I also
exactly.
think that another importance, besides you obviously you giving advice to people, is when people try to use MBTI for their self growth, and when they
Yep.
do look at functions, I feel like that's also important because, in a rare example, if you are ENTJ and you type yourself as ENFJ, okay, that's probably not gonna happen. But like just use
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah, like it's not going to be as helpful for your self growth because you don't know that your weakness is FI, right? Because I feel like
Right,
a lot of
right.
INTJs, if they develop their FI, their world will be so much better. Like probably other
That's
people's
true.
world will also be better
That's true. Yeah,
since they are
yeah.
a lot of people. So it's like when
Yeah.
you use it for self growth and when you actually look at the functions, that's when it matters because if you are a completely different type, like you have completely different functions that you value. So it's a very
Hmm.
different level of weakness, very different like things that you should like get better at, and types of people that maybe can help you with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it's the case that you're using it for genuine self growth, then
Mhm.
it would be definitely important for you to properly type yourself, whether that be through introspection or if you even need like a typing session. I think that'll definitely help you.
Yeah.
Again, this is really if you're trying to use it as like a tool for self growth. If you're just doing it because you want to see what kind of anime character you match up with or something, that's completely fine. I don't really care. That, you know,
Yeah.
that's
Like whatever.
completely fine. But yeah, if you are genuinely, so if you're using it for yourself for self growth, and if you are giving people advice, not necessarily just on YouTube, but if you even have like an Instagram platform or something that you're like sharing advice, I think it's definitely important that you type yourself correctly because otherwise you're just spreading a bunch of crap all over the place. And that's
Yeah.
how the mistype
Right.
rabbit hole
Right.
begins.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's what happens with the internet. Like, you know, there's a lot of misinformation and confusion. Yeah, with the
Yeah,
type.
especially if you're the kind of person, especially if you like identify with or you seek belonging, especially if you're the kind of person that seeks belonging in a community,
Mhm.
unfortunately you're going to get a bunch of people that identify with the community rather than the type. And
Yeah.
so you're going to get a bunch of people that think that, they're the only ones in the world that feel empathy for people. And they're just
Yeah.
going to huddle around this community sharing misinformation and,
Mhm.
and then sharing that misinformation to other people. And then, yeah, that it's just this whole cycle of just like mistypes everywhere. Again, it's completely fine. But, I think that if you're trying to share advice, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah. Or like
Yeah.
actually trying to understand the functions for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Lastly, I think we can touch on sort of, uh, oh yeah, like your journey as after knowing about personality type. Like, do you
Mm.
think that changed about after you found out that you were ESFP, and I mean your husband is ISFJ, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Do you think it changed anyway in how you relate to people, or do you think that's like just how it is?
Honestly, not as much because at the end of the day, the way I'm going to do the things that I want to do anyway, regardless of type. However, I think it was enlightening to at least know that I was an extroverted type. I think if anything, I don't care what type I am, but I think knowing that I was an extroverted type really helped me in my growth because
Oh
all this
yeah. Mm.
time, yeah, I thought that introverts were these people that just like hated people and just, uh, were the unique individualistic rainbows, right? But it's like, uh, I realized that I guess most of my life revolved around others or other objects. And I thought, oh, hello, that's because you're an extroverted type. You gain energy through interacting with the world rather than just being by yourself. And that was probably the biggest. If anybody's like watching this and wants to figure out their type or whatever, but doesn't want to do a deep dive, at least figure out if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Because most likely you are like, you're probably like an extroverted type, but you want to be an introvert because you don't like people. I think that's the most common theme I see.
Yeah. Oh, that goes with another important point that I wanted to touch on, which is the introversion versus extroversion.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that confuses a lot of people, because I don't know if you know about Enneagram. That's also a
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
confusion point, which is if you are a social, like okay, so basically it's like you have like certain instincts, and if you are social instinct as an introvert, sometimes you may type as extrovert. Um,
Right.
and and if you are an extrovert that is not so, how to say, like in love with people, like you said, like
Mm-hmm.
ENTJs, for example. I saw your TikTok video on that, and
Yeah.
it's so cool. Like TE dominance, you don't see them being like in love with people, right? Like ESTJs,
Hardly. Right. Right.
ENTJs, no, they don't like have this like, oh, I love people and I want to be around them all the time vibe. But it doesn't make them an introvert because they don't maybe want to be, they like extroversion and introversion is not based on how much you like.
People
um
or talking to people.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So for my case it's a bit interesting because I actually am a social instinct introvert. So you can see me sort of interacting with people because I sort of need that. Like I need to interact with people because as a social instinct introvert you still kind of need people to help you to feel like you belong. But at the same
Right.
time, it's not like a lot of people because I can get drained that way. So really the easiest way for me to understand if someone is introvert or extrovert is to see, do you actually feel more energized after interacting with people, or do you feel like you need to take a break and then you recharge? And usually it's like on the same nights, like when you see people in a gathering, like sometimes when you see the extroverts, like they get like more and more energized throughout the night, and the introverts sort of like decline in energy, and at the end of the day they need to like be in a corner somewhere. So like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
the way to tell because it works on the energy level. It's not about how much you like being around people. Yeah.
Right. Well, I also think that like another way that I've come to notice, because you'd be surprised how many FE dominant types think they're introverted, which is
Yeah, I know. I've
like
heard that.
what the hell? Because it's like you like duh, you love people, and it's just like how do you think you're an introverted? But the way I look at it is, it's so again, it's not about social, being social, right? It's about when presented with an external thing, the extroverts feel an obligation to interact with the thing no matter what. It's
Right.
like
Yeah.
it's not like this for example, if you're an SE dominant type, you're going to want to engage physically. Like you cannot tell me not to do something. I will do it,
Mhm.
Same with TE as well. If something needs to be organized, you can't tell a TE dom don't organize that. They will because they're extroverted. And same with FE doms who think they're introverted. It's
Mhm.
like when they're with people, the reason why they think they're introverted is because when they're with people, they literally cannot help themselves from interacting with that person. It's like I always say, like, well, if you don't want to talk to them, don't talk to them. But it's like that's not how FE works. FE is like if there's somebody in the room, they're gonna want to, not because they like them. It's just like it's natural for them to say something or have to interact with that person. So I think that's a good way to see if you're an introvert or an extrovert is can you,
Yeah.
I just made a
Mhm.
post on this, is like, are you able to ignore the extroverted thing? And if you can't
Yeah.
ignore it, then you're most likely an extroverted type.
True.
If it's
Because
your
I
natural instinct to interact, then yeah.
yeah. I ignore it all the time. So
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like
a
a
really
very
good way.
yeah. Because like a
Yeah.
VIP treatment, like you said. Because even as a social instinct introvert, like I choose
Yeah.
very
Yep.
selectively my social interaction. Like yeah, with friends, sure. Like with I always choose with like close friends
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
even with like strangers, I choose certain types of strangers that I feel like I can vibe better with, and I sort of like
Mhm.
ignore the rest. So it's very, I cannot do the opposite of that. I mean,
Yeah.
it can, but it will be like an act, which is very exhausting. So
Of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally, well, no, I don't understand that, but like I can see how the opposite of that would work for myself. Like I
right,
can't, like if because my husband's an introvert and we're so different in that sense. If there's
yeah,
something that needs to get taken action upon, I cannot leave it alone. I will engage with the thing. And for him, it's the
right,
opposite. I'm always like, no, like you need to get that done, but he'll find some way not to engage with the thing. And it's like, okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So that's a good
I
way to
feel
tell.
yeah. Like introverts are also like I feel like introverted functions are just more passive in general, like
Yeah. Yep.
introverted functions, yeah,
Hmm.
compared to extroverted functions, like
Yep. I would
NINE,
agree.
ISE, yeah. All this like
Yeah.
the dichotomy is obvious.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's surprising because even the official MBTI test does not test extroversion that way. It tests it
Yeah,
through social behaviors, which is so interesting because that's the official MBTI test. And even for me, even today, if I take the MBTI test, I will always pop up an introvert just because I don't really like talking to people as much. But it's like it's not that I don't like talking to people. It's just that I'm an FI type, so I don't talk to everybody. I will talk to people I like, but I'm not the kind of
yeah,
person that's gonna walk into a room and like, "Hey, how's it going?" Like it's just like
yeah.
so
Even
fake.
for me, I don't do that because my
Yeah.
essay is not that like
Yeah.
it's not like my primary focus.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, so definitely, I think people get because the extroversion introversion stereotype that people get too wrapped up in it. Like, oh, you're introvert, you're like shy all the time.
You're
You're like in your room.
special. Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't
Yeah.
want to go out. I really don't like that stereotype about introverts not wanting to go out because I'm like
Yeah.
I like going out, but I'm an introvert, so I mean, sure, I can be more selective going out. Like, yeah, only when close friends are also hating out. Like, I don't like going to a place where I don't know anyone. But
Right.
it doesn't mean that I don't like going out just because I'm not an extrovert. Yeah, so it's like very harmful. I feel because it makes people think they're not something, and then it's like a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
like sure, yeah, there are some introverts who prefer staying home all the time, but there are also like introverts who like being outdoors. Like ISTPs, they like sports, so obviously they most likely gonna be outdoors. But it doesn't make
Right.
them less of an introvert. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think well on my platform anyway, I always try to correct those things because I don't know, I feel like if nobody else is, then I might as well. So I try, but yeah, it's very those stereotypes are so harmful. There's so many people out there that have so much in them, to go out there and do the thing, but then they'll be like, "Oh, but I'm so introverted," and it's like, what the hell? Like,
Yeah, no.
no, you're not.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
people picture extroverts being like have to be
party
outdoors all the time,
animals.
have to
Yeah,
talk to people all the time. Like nobody's like that. I mean, maybe ESFJs, but even
and
then,
even
they might,
yeah, even then they're not like that either.
yeah,
Yeah,
but they might be the closest to that stereotype, but still, yeah, not really exactly that.
I would say like the most extroverted type would probably be like the possibly like the ENFJ or ESTP.
No,
Oh no,
I
you
thought
know
it
what?
was
No, no, no.
at least in my, I mean, in my own experience,
Y-
it's the ESFJ, just because they
Yeah.
socialize with everyone. But
But you know what ESFJs though, they have SI, right? So I've noticed that as it relates to social situations, they're more sensitive about awkwardness because they have
mm,
SI, so they can feel when something is really awkward. So it can make them rather shy, and then they
oh,
think that they're introverted, or they think that they're socially awkward, but they're not socially awkward. It's just that
you're
they pay
not.
way too much attention to it. That's the thing. It's like
Yeah,
no,
you're
that
not
was
like
not
from
socially
the,
awkward.
yeah, from the third person's perspective. I don't think anyone felt that way about
Yeah,
being socially awkward. Yeah,
yeah,
it's just an
it's really
internal
strange.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll come to me in typing sessions like, but I'm just so socially awkward, and I just don't consider myself an extrovert. And it's like, no, it's because you're paying way too much attention to those little details. Like that's why. But nobody thinks you're introverted at all.
Yeah, probably the whole
Yeah,
school knows who they are if they're in
yeah,
school. At work,
yeah,
everyone from different
yeah,
floor know who they are.
yeah. They're very quirky people. I've noticed.
Quirky, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
they like to see themselves that way too. So
yeah. True, true.
it's like the
Yeah,
NE
yeah.
tertiary
It's
function.
that NE. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're like, I'm
Yeah.
so quirky.
Yeah, I'm so creative and quirky. I always have the best comebacks to say.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's
Yeah,
you.
that's
Okay,
like,
got it.
yeah, yeah. We get it. You're different. Like, yeah,
Yeah, it's really interesting how it plays into people's self-image and like, yeah,
I know. Yeah. Hence why mistypes happen.
yeah,
Hence, yeah, exactly.
yeah. So I think this is a very insightful session. Hopefully, people
Yeah.
help, and it helps people figure out their types. And yeah, so I would also put your YouTube channel in the description box.
Yes.
And remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.